Sometimes when you're trying to get work done, a bit of the familiar is a great way to get yourself jump-started. For example, a dedicated workspace that you do all your work in, driving to the office, grabbing a cup of coffee, going through your morning routine. All that can be a real help. However, sometimes it can work against you. Especially these days, now that more people are working remotely than ever before, it can be hard to get yourself to be productive in your normal everyday environment and all of the distractions that it has. This video is about my experience taking a week away from my normal environment and going someplace where I could be on my own, someplace that I felt would be conducive to pursuing my own projects, in this case, doing some writing. Of course, it didn't have to be writing. It could have been coding or pretty much anything else. But the question still remains, was this experiment of leaving and going someplace just to get some work done successful? I considered several different options to get away. I wanted to have some sort of a dedicated space that I could work in, the ability to have it be relatively quiet, and easy access to food that I would like to eat, ideally more than one type of food. I considered things like flying to someplace or driving to someplace, getting a hotel room, but the expenses tended to be so high I wondered if it would even be worth it. After a little bit of investigation, I came across an option that sounded like something that was at least worth investigating a little further. That is, cruise ships. I live near Seattle, and that means that the Port of Seattle is very convenient for me to get to. So I started taking a look at cruises that would leave from and return back to Seattle so that I wouldn't have to worry about doing any air travel. It turns out there's a lot of Alaska cruises that leave from Seattle for anywhere from a couple of nights to a week and then come back again. Taking a look at them, they also go all across the spectrum in terms of price. As I was looking though, I found one cruise in particular that advertised a price of $250 for a total of 8 nights, which sounded too good to be true. The first thing that I found was typically when you take a look at a cruise price, it'll quote you a certain price per person, but it's assuming 2 of you sharing a cabin. They tend to rent out the cabin and then charge you for extra people that you shoehorn into it. So if you saw a cruise for $498 per person, and then you went ahead and clicked on, oh, let's add the options and pick a room, then you might find that actually the price is just doubled because it's assuming double occupancy. So fine, you go back and you click and say, nope, I just want it to be one person, just me. And you find that the price doesn't really drop. Again, this is because they are selling that cabin and they expect to get a certain amount of money from it. These days, there's an increasing trend of solo cruisers. In other words, people who want to go on a cruise on their own. And so there's a certain number of cabins on many of the larger cruise ships that are set up and will be sold at a rate expecting a single person rather than 2 people. As luck would have it, this rate that I saw for $250 for 8 nights, that was for a cabin that was for a solo traveler. Even though it could sleep up to 4 people in it, if you really, really liked each other. It was still something where they didn't increase the price just because it was only me traveling. There's a lot of other costs associated with the cruise. For example, you have to pay port taxes, which are things that the cruise company themselves has to pay. That brought me up from roughly $250 to roughly $550. And then gratuities are accustomed to pay up front as well. That was another $120. I wanted to get a drinks package so I can get soda pop. You can get juices for free, but you can't get soda pop for free. So I got that as well. And I got an unlimited internet package just in case I wanted to be able to do an investigation or maybe play games. The cruise ships use satellite broadband, so I knew I wasn't going to be able to play any broadband games, at least not have a very good time at them, because the latency would be anywhere from 700 milliseconds to a second, which is way too much for a game. But still, these are the things I bought, and by the time I added it all together, I was still below $800 total, so less than $100 a night for room and board, for a clean room, quiet room. Sounded like it was worth a shot. So I went ahead and bought it, scheduled it, and hopped on the cruise ship. The cruise line that was offering this really good fare was Carnival, which I had some misgivings about. I'd never actually been on them, but I was worried it was more of a party cruise, not so nice, and blah, 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 because the prices were consistently low. By the time I was on the ship, I found all of my worries to be unfounded. The room was nice, it was clean. The ship was a little older, but it was still big and it was still in good shape. There were more than 2,000 spots for passengers on the ship, which means they had a lot of different facilities and a lot of different places to eat. Despite me being near the bow of the ship and also very close to one of the main theaters, I wasn't bothered by noise at all. Out of the whole cruise, there was really only one day that was bumpy enough to get me to take the medicine I'd brought along, Bonine. I chewed a tiny little tablet, didn't really have any problems from it, wasn't especially sleepy, and had absolutely no problems with a stomach upset. So by and large, the fact that I was on a cruise ship was no problem whatsoever. So what about my main goal, trying to get some work done? I brought my Surface Pro 6 with me, along with a separate keyboard and mouse, and a power bar that had chargers for USB as well. And I tried to make sure that I would be able to get work done. Even though the room is relatively compact, it's pretty well set out, and I found that the chair was comfortable to sit in at the desk, and the desk itself had enough room for me to set everything down and be comfortable typing. As I started writing, I was very happy that I brought the external keyboard and mouse. The Surface Pro's keyboard is just fine, but there's no substitute for a real keyboard when you're planning on doing a lot of writing. And being the way I am, any excuse not to write I'm likely to take, so it's much better to nip those in the bud. Before the cruise, I tried to set a goal for how much work I wanted to get each done. I decided that it would be 10 pages a day of writing, or about 2,500 words of unfinished prose, just first draft quality. I figured if I could hold myself to that every day for the whole cruise, that would actually be pretty good. Secretly, I hope to do more, ridiculous amounts. Well, if I can type this fast for this long, I could write a whole book by the time the cruise is done. Yeah, but that didn't happen. And in fact, some days I had a lot of trouble getting myself motivated to write. In particular, what I found was just like any place else. If you want to procrastinate, you'll find a way to do it. So in my case, I would sit there and I would say, well, I don't feel like writing right now. I only need to write a couple hours to meet my quota. So let's go visit the food bar. Let's go up to the top floor and take several laps around the ship. Let's go eat some more. Let's go take in the view. All these sorts of things. And of course, even though the connection wasn't good enough for me to play the games that I like right now, I tried anyways, and I found ways of playing that weren't as awful as they should have been. So I wound up distracting myself with that. The moral of the story to me is, if you're determined to take it easy, you're going to figure out a way to do it. The change of environment was great for getting me to be productive for a while. There was a day that I wrote over 6,000 words, which for me is pretty good. And total, I did write more than 10 pages a day, but I wound up with a total of about 90 pages of writing at the end. I have 9 scripts waiting to film, which is great. I made some good progress on both the outline and some of the content for the book that I was hoping to write. So in that regard, it was a successful trip. In addition to all that, I really got a chance to unplug and just take some time for myself, free from all the normal responsibilities that I have at home. That too was very valuable for me and made me feel more productive when I came back home. So that's kind of a side benefit. So was the cruise really more productive than I would have been at home in my home office? This is a question that I'm a lot more skeptical now than I was initially. Initially I thought, lock me in a room where I can't do much else, I'm bound to just be productive as anything. But now I'm starting to think, I have an office upstairs I almost never use. I can go there and put on headphones and have about the same environment. So let's rest up a little bit and let's take a week where I just hang at home with the intention of doing some writing in the mornings when it's easier for me, and see if I can do that same 10 pages a day. Looking back on the experience, I still think it was worth taking a cruise, especially for that cheap price point. I wouldn't hesitate to go on Carnival again. I wouldn't hesitate to take an interior room with no windows. It was actually kind of nice not having any light to wake me up. And whenever I got tired of looking at those 4 walls, there were plenty of other nice places on the ship to go sit and bring my laptop with me and type, or just look out at the view. So it was really quite nice. But I don't feel like it was productive enough to justify being away from my home and my family and my responsibilities here just to say I was going to produce a lot more. So in that regard, it was a bit of a failure. So that was my experience. Have you ever tried to get away from it all so that you can get some huge lump of work done? Were you more successful at it than I was? I'd love to hear your stories and your suggestions about how to be productive, especially if you're retired or on sabbatical, anything like that, or even just working remotely. I'd love to hear how you make yourself get work done. So please leave a comment down below. As always, thank you for watching and keep on pushing forward. Hi, this is John. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please think about subscribing so you get notified of my future videos. Also, if you are interested, you might want to check out the video I have linked here. Thanks, and keep on pushing forward.